Hi class, welcome to Remote Learning Ecology lesson number 6. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the levels of ecological organization and give an example of each. You will also be able to distinguish between a habitat and a niche. Remember that guided notes are provided for you in the Google form. Make sure that you are taking guided notes as you watch this video. Also, make sure you complete your Google form and submit a copy of your notes. Let's get started. Scientists really enjoy categorizing things. So when we talk about the levels of organization for an ecology, for the study of how organisms interact with their environment, we begin with the organism being the smallest unit, and then we can talk about populations, communities, ecosystems, biomes, and then ultimately the biosphere. So we are going to describe what each of these categories entail, and you should be taking notes on the definitions and examples for each level of ecological organization. So the guided notes that are provided in Google Classroom suggest that you use this chart in order to organize your notes. Take a minute to pause the video so that you can copy down this chart. The smallest category is an organism. We already learned about organisms when we learned about the smaller scale levels of biological organization, where we talked about cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and organisms. So an organism is just an individual thing. Here we have a bison. A population are all the individuals of one species of organism. So species have a common chromosome number, and they can interbreed and produce fertile offsprings. So a population are all the individuals of a species that live in the same area at the same time. So here is a picture of the bison of Yellowstone National Park. So we can talk about the population or the total number of bison organisms that make up the bison population. Now, the community in ecology are all the living organisms that live within an area. So they can include plants, animals, decomposers like fungus and bacteria. So here, the community includes the bison and the grass and the insects and the cowbirds that you can see here on top of the bison. So the community are all the living things. We've already talked about community interactions in previous lessons. So the organisms, the biotic factors, can interact with one another through competition for resources, predation, or the symbiotic relationships like mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. The ecosystem includes the community and the abiotic or non-living factors. So here you can see that within an ecosystem, energy from the sun is originally transferred to producers. Then that energy will be transferred to herbivores, and then to a first carnivore, and then to yet another carnivore. So we have abiotic factors, which are water and sunlight, that are required by producers to carry energy through an ecosystem. So again, the ecosystem are the biotic and abiotic factors in an area. So again, here you can see in an ecosystem, we can describe the feeding level as a trophic level. So producers, also called autotrophs or plants, are going to make their own food, and they're called the first trophic level. And then herbivores are called primary consumers because those are the first consumers. They eat the plants, and that is the second trophic level, and so forth. When we look at this pyramid shape, we can see that the sun gives its energy into the producers at the base of the pyramid. And in each level, we are losing energy. So we're accommodating less total energy and also usually less total number of organisms as we move through the different trophic levels. Now, every trophic level is able to transfer some energy to decomposers. But an ecosystem, again, is the interaction between the abiotic non-living factors such as sunlight, temperature, water, carbon dioxide, and oxygen, and the biotic factors or the living organisms. Our largest category is called a biome. A biome is an area on the planet that has specific abiotic factors that contribute to the biotic life that exists in that area. I know you are familiar with the biome, the tropical rainforest, and the plants and the animals that you would find in a tropical rainforest are dictated by the temperatures and precipitation available in that area. And they're vastly different than the organisms, the plants and animals that you'll find in the polar regions or the polar biomes, because polar biomes have different abiotic factors, temperature and precipitation, which influence the different types of living organisms that can live in that area. So the difference between a biome and an ecosystem is a biome can have many different interconnected ecosystems. For instance, the marine biome includes the kelp forest, which will interact with the coral reefs. Now, those have different conditions and different living organisms, but they are also interconnected. So a biome can have several ecosystems within it. Biosphere is just the earth where living things exist. So here, as a summary, you can see that an organism, we have one frog, and a population has to be the same species. So here you can see that we have 5 frogs. Then a community are all the living things. So we include the frogs and the grass and the insects and the birds. And in an ecosystem, we include not only the living things, but also the non-living things like the water and the soil and the minerals. And the ecosystems all exist in the biosphere. So the biosphere is just the entire region of Earth in which life exists. Now we're going to take a minute to hear from Miss Burchard, which has an easy way to help you remember how ecosystems are organized from largest to smallest. And she'll tell us a little bit more about habitats and niches.
One way that can help you to remember this is just to think from big to small, and B starts with big, so that's how you can remember it. Think big elephants can pee outside, and that'll help you to remember to go from big to small. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between a habitat versus a niche. Once we have all this vocabulary kind of down, we go a little bit deeper. But let's look at about niche and habitat. Students really get confused between these two terms. Basically, a niche is the role a species plays in a community. It could be its diet what an organism does for the ecosystem, as opposed to a habitat. A habitat is specifically the place in which an organism lives out its life. Could be a desert, could be the forest, could be a sea. It could even be just a tree where you have many different types of birds on that tree. The reason why we talk about a lot of this is because if an organism occupies the same niche as another organism, they're going to compete for that resource. So one thing, you might have a tree, but a tree might have many different species of birds on it. And so maybe they all have different niches and they can all live there peacefully and happily. One of the things I want you to think about is like a classroom. Basically, our classroom would be a habitat. Our niche might be the different roles that all of you guys play in that classroom. Maybe somebody grades the papers. Maybe somebody passes out papers. Maybe someone collects the papers. Maybe someone takes the notes for the class. So everyone having a role that helps us actually to get a function or job off the ground. It's like our little ecosystem.
And now we're going to hear from my good friends, the Amoeba Sisters, a little bit about ecological organization.
The first level that we are going to start with is the most basic living level that makes up all of life. It is the cell. Now, can something be smaller than a cell? Sure. For the cells that contain organelles, the organelles are obviously smaller than the cell they are contained in. Biomolecules are smaller than cells. We learn about biomolecules as they are major non-living components within cells. Atoms are smaller than a cell. You can even get smaller than atoms when considering subatomic particles. But for this video, we are going to start at the cellular level, a basic living unit. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about bacteria, archaea, fungi, protists, plants, or animals. If you're talking about something alive, you're talking about something made up of one or more cells. Now, when you have a lot of cells that are working together for a combined function, you end up with the next level, tissues. An example of tissue includes cardiac muscle tissue, which would be made up of many cardiac muscle cells. Tissues make up organs, which is our third level. You have a lot of organs in your body. An example of an organ would include your heart. When you have multiple organs working together, you end up with the next level, an organ system. Consider the digestive system. It includes your stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, liver, etc. These particular organs work together to help you digest your food and to use the food for energy that you need for all kinds of cell processes. The digestive system is just one example of an organ system. But tie in all of the organ systems and what do you get? An individual, an organism, like you, or this platypus. He's got organ systems too. Now, if you have a lot of platypus together, what's the plural of platypus? According to dictionary.com, you can say platypi, which sounds especially fancy. And you have a population. This population of platypi can breed with each other. And they're all the same species. It's a platypi population. Great YouTube channel name right there. But include other populations such as fish, algae, and plants along with the platypi, and now you have a community. A community includes many populations, but it does not include abiotic factors. Abiotic factors are factors that are non-living, like rocks. Abiotic factors are not considered in the community level, just biotic factors. Biotic factors, on the other hand, are living. When abiotic factors are considered, such as the rocks, the temperature of this environment, the water, and the biotic factors, such as all the organisms we mentioned before, we now have an ecosystem. Well, it turns out that many ecosystems can be found in different regions on the globe. If talking about this collectively, you are at the level of biome. An example is a desert biome or a rainforest biome. You will find desert ecosystems or rainforest ecosystems in multiple places on the globe. But when talking about a desert biome or a rainforest biome, you are considering all of these ecosystems. Now, what happens when you put all the biomes together? Well, now you are talking about the level of the biosphere. The biosphere includes anywhere on our planet where life is supported. It is the sum of all of the biomes, all the areas where organisms live. Well, We're finished with our tour of the biological levels of organization, but remember, this is just an overview. The more biology you learn, the more you will discover how these levels relate to each other.
And you've done it. You're at the end of lesson number 6 on remote learning, ecology. It's important that you remember that ecosystems depend on both abiotic and biotic factors, and an ecosystem consists of all the populations in a given area together with their non-living environment. Make sure you complete your Google form, take notes and upload them to Google Classroom, and come to office hours with any questions you have. I'll see you soon.